I think I can knock one thing off this task list, and that's kind of what I want to do. Every video is trying to knock one thing off, and I think I did the boringest thing that looks like the least work. So I finished dealing with the memory. And what I alluded to last time was I had to split up. I'd already created the second file, but it wasn't properly in use. So now it's in use. Things are removed from the configuration file. The configuration file holds the gear settings, the gains, how many gears, all sorts of stuff like this. The position one holds its last known position, its current target gear, and the current rotations. And some of that is redundant information, but yeah, I'll clean that up too later. But right now, this is the first time where when I plug it in, the derailleur, it doesn't freak out. And that is the most important part, because it makes this feel like it's going from some sort of janky on the table science fair or Arduino code project to something that feels like it's stable. You're making refinements, you're adding features. This is the thing where you plug it in and you're like, yes, it did nothing. Which sounds utterly ridiculous. And I think for the most part, that's one of the reasons why I haven't done as many update videos on things in the past, because so many things just feel like it's hard to make them sound interesting. And in this case, like, taking out the jank is such a major milestone, even though that I probably added a lot of jank that still needs to be cleaned up in the code. It's a bit of an accomplishment. But I also said to myself that if I'm getting back into these videos, I'm going to take one thing and I am going to do the video on it. And so this one's probably going to be a little bit slower, but it's really necessary, because this is the stuff that it moves things from, like, say, your janky on the web Arduino style code to something that feels like it's moving towards a product. Again, reminder, this is never going to be a product. I don't intend to sell this at all. This is just a bit of a replacement for what I perceive as a problem. I had already started creating these two files. I think I showed that last time, maybe if you caught that when I was showing the code editor. But I needed to remove stuff from one, great, but then I had to update all the links to the other one. Okay, so I did that. But now I'm still passing around, basically, whenever I take the data handler, it would update the PID controller and the motor position controller stuff. They'd make copies, and I didn't like that. Okay, so I rewrote them to hand pointers off to them. And that was good, right up until the point that I realized it's the motor position controller that needs to basically say, hey, I'm done shifting, and the only thing that's currently set up to do this file saves is the data handler. Now, either I can push it down to the motor position, or I can have the motor position access it separately, but you don't like too many things accessing these functions. So then I created a function pointer so to tell the motor position, all right, rather than you need to update something, well, here is a function. So the data handler would tell it which function it would call back. And that was great. Like, this was the beginning of actually being able to unplug it and plug it back in, and it would wake up and restore all of the positional stuff. Like, I was starting to legit get very excited, because it would not, like, this is the end of jank. This would be the end of the jank. So I started restoring stuff into it. When I would wake up, I'd read the memory, it would restore it in, and I thought, aha, I found the bug, the last bug. And, well, I started doing some logging recording, and you can take a look at how that went. It's never going to have anything. So what I need to do is I need to load in what I'm now spend a bunch of time renaming all of this stuff in a Titan mem from current angle to target angle, because that should be the stored target, or where it was when it saved it, which will be the future target. Yeah, when it wakes up, I just need to load that into the old angle. Now I just need to find a good way of doing it, because the data handler is responsible. So it links the memory. And then, so in here, angle O should be equal to PPS dot, but it'll that target angle, because that's the last angle that was sorted. That's where it was successfully located. And for some formatting reasons, let's put that here and make flash. So this is live. I've not done this before. So hold it here so you can see it. Rotate it around again. Well, no time like to try and reboot it. Yeah, I was feeling frustrated. Like, I had looked at this code and been reading through my own. I've written all of this. I've read through so much of it, being like, if like the last function was, in order to count the rotations, it uses the last angle. And the flaw that I thought I had solved was, oh, right, that's always initializing to 0. So when the motor starts up, it has an angle that is current angle, but its last angle is the wrong angle. Okay. But now there's a huge difference, because that was 0, could be, say, 300 degrees, and now it would fall into the trap of my little code of saying, oh, a rotation has occurred. It's like, oh, God. It's so basic. And so I'd fill that in. Now it restored the old angle, and it would still plug it in, and you're supposed to stay put. Well, it all just came down to that angle is 0 to 360 degrees. I was handing it the full whatever, could be 4,000. So whenever it did its calculation, it too would result in a change in rotation. So once I did that, it was almost sorted out, but I had to hard code some of the sine min and max values, which I'll talk about shortly. But before that, this is how I reacted. Like, this is the first time that it's working, and it just felt so good to get through that. So now I have a piece of tape on it, and if I flash this, it might jiggle, but that is it. I could feel the motor, but it didn't move. Now, saved. I can feel it jiggle, and it didn't move. So, all right, pointing that way, and it's saved. Didn't move. Jiggled a little bit. So the slight movement now is all due to, or it should all be due to, these being hard coded. So these values are being hard coded on startup. That's not That's not good because we are somewhere down here. Yeah, so we are looking for the new mins and max. And the whole thing with that is the Hall effect versus the internal references. So I mentioned about this whole angle stuff, and it's important to understand that there's Hall effect sensors in these derailleurs. Now, you might have heard of Hall effect sensors because the big thing about gaming controllers right now is that, oh my God, these are Hall effect sensors, the same as PlayStation 3. Over the years, like they've gone back and forth between resistive pots, optical encoders, and like the N64, and Hall effects. And Hall effects are the new things for durability because they are non-contact, they're non-wearing. But basically, what it is if you have a magnet with say a north and a south pole, it reads a value proportional to the field strength, so the field strength gets stronger as it goes up, or if it's perpendicular. So if I have a magnet that rotates, like in the Campagnolo derailleur, here this Hall effect should be 0, and here it should be maximum. Or maximum positive, say, if this is north, and then maximum negative here. And so you need to know what this, and these values are. And you can do that by, because you have two of them, and you're basically calculating an angle with a tangent function or an inverse tangent function. You need to know what your min and max are to figure out your average because they're pretty linear. But how do you do that? Well, you have to keep checking as it rotates. And that's what my code does. It checks it as it rotates, and if it does, it updates. Now it has to have a function to go back to update the config file if these change, but that's not a huge deal. What's annoying is now let's imagine someone changed their derailleur and those magnets are different, or their Hall effect sensors are different, or any number of things. Maybe the derailleur took a knock and that magnet or a Hall effect sensor shifted just a little bit. So I've had to add to the list, I need a new way of algorithmically detecting it changed or updating it as time goes on. And that's going to be another topic, but it's not part of the minimum viable, but it is something I need to be aware of, is that if someone got a new derailleur and swapped it in. Now, I don't know actually how Campagnolo dealt with this in their actual power units. Maybe they had an algorithm that detects, or maybe they just had them hard-coded and it was good enough, because they're all very, very similar. I've got 3.5 derailleurs. By half, I mean I've got the motor out of one. So I don't have a huge sample size to work with, but I'm going to look at it and I'll check all my derailleurs and I'll work on some algorithmic way of checking, you know, maybe every time it wakes it'll do, and if they deviate from the stored values, it'll update them. If it deviates enough, I should say, or maybe a decay algorithm. So, you know, every time it does full rotations or something like that, it'll adjust the other maximum value by half. And so they'll always decay to where they should be. Actually, I think that was an algorithm that PowerTap used, or they used something similar to that for zeroing while coasting. Can't remember, I actually don't fully understand, but I knew they had a coasting method, and I assume it was a decay algorithm because I used to watch the zero value adjust. Yeah, still pretty interested in this, and like I say, still pretty motivated. So what's next? I think now that it no longer feels like a jank project, I think the important thing to do is let's get it shifting properly. You know, so I need to be able to set up gears. So I need to really figure out what those button controls do. How do I zero set? How do I trim the whole old derailleur? How do I trim individual gears? Do I need that button to do anything else? I've thought of weird combinations of, I can hold the mode button, but I can only press the paddle. I can't hold the mode button and press the thumb button. Stuff like that. Other than that, like that will lead into getting the derailleur working, and it's kind of pressing me that the thing after that might need to be a little deviation where I actually snoop on the regular derailleurs. The reason being is in certain combinations, I think on the front, and maybe it doesn't matter, but the amounts they do it in the rear are different, but they overshift in certain gears. So they'll go woot, 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 woot. And that's to ensure that they did the shift. One of the things to note is the Campagnolo derailleurs, as far as I understand, short of someone with like the beefiest hands, the Campagnolo EPS derailleurs were the most powerful. They output the most force of all electronic. And I think, if I remember correctly, even mechanical hand force, because that the lever arm and between cable stretch and everything it could do. I mean, I'm sure you could overpower it, but like for the average person, they weren't putting as much force. Like, also, this is one of the things, you watch a pro use mechanical group sets, it is like a rocket compared to Joe Blow shifting. But those overshifts, I need to capture that. So I need to like build something to snoop on them, and I need to record it, but they're also duty cycling their Hall effect sensors, which makes it really hard for me because if I put it into an oscilloscope while it moves, great. I have to get like 1 million data points out of that and into a computer, and now it's a pain. It's a pain. I want to build something that'll just like algorithmically average it out. When they like drop off, it'll stop. It's like, oh, we don't need that. We don't need that. We just, what's the stable numbers? What's the stable numbers? And see how much it overshifts. And then I can run it through the exact same algorithms I use for calculating my angles and stuff. So that would be further on. And as you probably, yeah, there's a couple, at least one other project recorded now, so that this video will slot in beforehand. And so I'm trying to intersperse some of the things I'm doing. I'm really trying to get through a backlog of other cool things that I've wanted to work on for months and months and just haven't been able to. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and take care.